Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Koritis. Today is Sunday, October 13th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the Week Ahead segment. I know I was absent on last Thursday and Friday, so I wanted to make sure that I did a podcast this evening because a lot took place on Thursday and Friday. A lot is continuing to transpire over the weekend, and it looks like this week is going to be a very busy week, very eventful on many different fronts. So I hope you guys enjoyed your weekend. Buckle up. It's going to be a roller coaster of a ride this week, and quite frankly, probably for the remainder of this year, to say the very least. I imagine this volatility is going to continue well into and throughout 2020 as well. A lot to get to here. Hopefully we can get through all of it. I want to talk about the markets. I want to talk about our volatility model because once again, it performed beautifully last week. Very timely that we updated the volatility model and discussed this last week. It was updated. We said, look, be on the lookout for markets to be volatile for the remainder of the year. Look for 1% moves, either to the positive or to the negative, especially with respect to the Dow and to the S&P 500. Look for about 3 days per week for the remainder of this year of moves of 1% greater than or less than, okay? So 1%, 1.5% to the plus, 1%, negative 1.5%, and so on, okay? Anything in between, I don't consider volatile. All right, even though it can be, that's not how I do it with the model. But if you look at it, we said 3 days a week for the Dow and for the S&P 500. The NASDAQ and the Russell 2000, the small cap index, are pretty much on track. So you're probably going to see about one volatile day per week for the remainder of the year. Of course, it could be more, it could be less, but that seems to be on track. The real volatility is going to be in the bigger boys with the Dow and the S&P 500. So the volatility model is continuing to be right on track, which is just amazing because it's such a simple model. But we like simplicity here at the Capital News. Some more bad news for Boeing. Now, we talked last week, we did a podcast, trouble at the plant, and we focused on General Electric and we focused on General Motors, and we also talked about Boeing a little bit. Boeing's discussion last week was in regards to the 737 MAX airplane that continues to be grounded. And we said, just sort of our spider sense here, something might be bigger beneath the surface. And the reason why this plane is still grounded is because, obviously this is literally dealing with life and death, putting people in the air. This isn't an iPhone. This isn't a widget. This isn't a toaster oven. This is an airplane. Okay, this has to be tested. This has to be verified. This has to meet the guidelines of the FAA and every other safety board that's out there in regards to aviation, not only here in the United States, but around the world. Now, clearly, Boeing is going to get some preferential treatment here in the United States because, one, it's an American company, and two, Boeing is the largest exporter for the United States of America. So that's why we were talking about this last week. This is why this was such a focus point, because if there is something much deeper, much more structural with the problem surrounding Boeing 737 MAX airliner, not just a software glitch that needs updated, not just a handful more hours that pilots need hands-on training, no, something structural, something that is an engineering flaw, that this airplane cannot fly, that it does not meet the guidelines, the safety guidelines and regulations, not only of the FAA, but many other safety boards around the world. If that proves to be true, look out below because Boeing could prove to be a major catalyst to what's already set in motion. So this will just basically be a layman-like event, which of course took place back in 2008, that really kicked off the financial crisis, really got it going. So then it was a financial crisis kicked off by a bank. This time, who knows, it could be a major manufacturer. Now, Boeing is part of the military-industrial complex. They are awarded billions and billions of dollars in government contracts every year. I am not demonizing their wealth, their products, and a whole host of things. But nevertheless, the government, my point here is the government will do what is necessary to bail them out or to assist them to any degree possible because they are the country's largest exporter, because they are a major international corporation. As it stands today, you have Boeing and you have Airbus. Now you have the Chinese who are starting to compete. You have the Russians, even the Russians are starting to compete in building some airlines. But it's really Boeing versus Airbus. Now we're going to talk about the U.S.-China trade talks, but if Donnie Boy here has some sort of initial phase one, whatever the hell he wants to call it, agreement with the Chinese, is he then going to move on to the EU, which he has said on multiple occasions that they screw over the United States even worse than what China does? I mean, you can't have a 2-year trade war with China, say that the Europeans screw us even harder than the Chinese do, and then not go after the EU. Well, if Donnie Boy goes after the EU, that's where Airbus is. So do you think a whole bunch of European nations are going to sign up to buy even more Boeing airliners, whether or not it's the 737 MAX or some other airliner? I highly doubt it. So, this is not going to bode well for Boeing. And if there is a fundamental structural engineering flaw with the 737 MAX, which means it will not be flown again, then look out below. Because all of that money, we had that discussion on that podcast, check it out. But I'm just warning you, if this happens, be prepared. I honestly hope this does not happen, because this literally is an issue of life or death when it comes to air travel. This is thousands upon thousands upon thousands of jobs here in this country. Supply chains will be disrupted. This will truly be devastating. But like I said, this is not an iPhone. This is not something you can just try to patch over and then just deal with the lawsuits later. No. This is something life and death here. So the FAA can't just, rubber stamp this, push it through, okay, take off, pilot, good luck, see you later. Can't do that here. So be mindful of the Boeing situation, because the new Boeing story that broke over the weekend that I saw with older models is they are noticing cracks from the tail to the fuselage. Now, again, these are older models, but nevertheless, they've still been airborne. They are still operational. But now these flights or these airlines are also being grounded, because obviously you don't want the tail to fall off during flight. Not good. So we'll keep you updated, because I do think GM, GE, and Boeing, right now as I see it, are things to be on the radar, because this is not going to get front page news right now. It will if this transpires. Again, we're hoping it doesn't, because this will be catastrophic on multiple fronts, but nevertheless, something that could come out of left field, right field, sneak up from behind you that doesn't get a lot of media coverage right now, so just be mindful of that. We have a continuation of the strike between, obviously, the United Auto Workers, UAW, and General Motors. We are basically on our 4th week, maybe going into the 5th week already. We stated in that podcast last week, be on the lookout, because as it stands, about 46,000 GM employees are affected by this strike. And right now, the UAW is paying them $250 per week. And we said last week during that podcast, it's okay if these workers have a little bit of a safety cushion if they've saved up. Maybe they're married, their spouse works as well, so they got dual income coming in. So obviously it's going to be a hit, excuse me. But maybe they can continue on a little bit further, but be mindful of that, because that might not be the case for everybody. Some people might be single, or even if they are dual income, maybe it's not enough to cover the bills. You got mortgage, you got car payments, you got kids, childcare, whatever the hell you got to pay for just to make it here in this country. It's tough to make ends meet as it is. Do you want to be really living paycheck to paycheck and using credit cards as a buffer to make ends meet? So he said, is $250 going to be enough? Well, it appears that it isn't. And now, because both sides, GM and the UAW, have dug in even deeper, you now have the UAW agreeing to pay these workers who are affected by the strike $275 per week as opposed to $250. So an extra $25 a week times 4 is an extra $100 a month. Is that going to be enough? Well, it's obviously more, so it might be able to push them further out and help these people out for a little bit longer. But again, they are running against the clock, because this is expensive for the UAW. According to several estimates, so far this strike has cost GM $1 billion, which is nothing to sneeze at. The sticking point, obviously UAW wants higher pay, they want better benefits, and they want a guarantee and assurances from General Motors that GM will not move plants, that they will not shutter plants. Well, UAW can say, well, we want higher wages. GM says, well, we want lower, and you meet somewhere in the middle. Same thing with the benefits. I'm sure something could be worked out eventually. It's those assurances that GM cannot give or will not give to the UAW. So what's that tell you? Is GM planning to shutter more plants? Are they planning on moving things further to Mexico or to Canada or to China or somewhere else in Asia? Because if they can't make these assurances and guarantees, that's not going to bode well for the auto sector here in the United States, because obviously those are well-paid manufacturing jobs. And if you're going to disrupt the supply chain again, it's not going to be good for these people and these families and these communities throughout the country, but particularly with GM in the Midwest, which is already being hit, which we talk about here on a near daily basis with all of the economic data that we discuss. So that continues. Again, we're going to talk about the trade war. We have some other comments we're going to make in regards to the trade war, the Hong Kong protest, and the NBA, this mini scandal within the NBA. Basically, well, you can't badmouth China. You can't support free speech and the right to protest. You can't do it. It's too much money to be made in China. You stupid. You can't do it. So we're going to talk about that because it's just something that's appalling and is just symptomatic of the larger problem that we face here in the United States, where there is no more patriotism, there is no country first. It's all about the almighty dollar. There's no morals, there's no constitution, there's no putting this country first. It's all about how much money can we make, period, end of story. Brexit deal, or is there? Well, if you listen to some of the headlines last week, everybody think, oh, well, we're a lot closer. Well, then you read some of the headlines over the weekend. No, there's still some confusion. There's really not a Brexit deal. And there's no guarantee that Parliament, the UK Parliament, is going to pass it. Well, what a surprise. So everything was rallying. That was just another thing to sort of flood the markets that we're going to talk about here last week that just got the markets rallying on Thursday and Friday, only to sort of be a little bit more disappointed over the weekend, and we'll see how that transpires throughout this week. We also have the Queen's speech. Queenie Baby's going to be talking on Monday. The Queen's speech is something that she gives usually on an annual basis, but because of all of the contention surrounding the Brexit talks and everything that the former Prime Minister Theresa May was doing, the Queen has not given a speech before Parliament for 2 years, I believe. So now she will, with the new Prime Minister in place, Boris Johnson, she will be delivering the Queen's speech. This is going to be about 10 minutes long, but it is akin to the State of the Union address here in the United States. She's basically going to mention what the government, their objectives are, and then there is going to be a vote on it following the Queen's speech in Parliament. And here's where things can get really juicy and can get really interesting. If the Queen's speech vote gets defeated, okay, this means whatever she talks about, she loses, which means Boris Johnson loses once again on another vote in Parliament. There's going to be an immense amount of pressure on Boris Johnson to resign because he's not getting anything passed in regards to Brexit. He does not to date have a deal. The hard deadline is for October 31st, Halloween trick-or-treat. However, I do believe the interim deadline is for October 19th because a deal has to be had so it can be debated and discussed before Parliament, and then it would have to be voted on and agreed upon through Parliament. So you got to dot your I's, cross your T's, and then you got a little bit of wiggle room, and then basically that's it till the end of the month. Now, right now, you continue to have Boris Johnson continue to say, deal or no deal, we're out of here on October 31st. So there's a lot that's going to be taking place over in the UK and Europe. I imagine a lot of volatility in the currency markets. The British pound against the US dollar last week, I think just on Friday alone, was up over 2% at one point during the trading session. And like I've stated here many times before, for those of you who may not be familiar with the Forex markets, the currency markets, a 2% move is huge. A 1% move in the markets, in the currency markets, is huge. So when you have a 2% move in one day, that is a huge move, especially for a major currency like the British pound. So we'll keep you updated on that. Brexit deal or no deal, we are in the land of Shakespeare. Queenie Baby's going to be dressed up in the crown jewels. She's actually going to be escorted or traveling via a horse-drawn carriage. I'm not making this up. A horse-drawn carriage from Buckingham Palace to Westminster, where's Parliament, and then she's going to give her speech before Parliament, and I believe also members of the House of Lords will be there. So stay tuned for that and check that out, because she will be wearing the crown jewels, and I'm sure she'll be in a robe and all that stuff. So check her out. Some other conversation I'd like to have here today, if we have time, is on the impeachment inquiry and all the nonsense that's surrounding it. You know, if it's one thing to investigate Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden, then I think it's good enough to also investigate Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump, Donnie Trump, Eric Trump, Tiffany Trump, all his kids too. If it's good enough to go after Vice President Biden and his son, then you got to go after President Trump and his children as well. Okay, you just have to. You can't have it both ways, because Joe Biden, I don't like him. I'm not defending him. You understand this? I think he's corrupt as the day is long too. But let me tell you something. Donald Trump ain't no saint either. All right? And he has his daughter, Ivanka Trump, who is basically an advisor or an informal advisor to him, but she's sitting there in the cabinet meetings. She's sitting there in the trade negotiations. Her husband, Jared Kushner, is flying all over God's creation, trying to broker peace in the Middle East. I mean, he's a real estate tycoon. Okay? I mean, more power to him, I guess, if he can get it. But what's going on here? You can't have it both ways. What's he doing? What other types of deals is he making behind the scenes? What type of deals is Ivanka making behind the scenes? Because we know that Ivanka and her companies have received trademark approval from China. All right? This is an article from Reuters from last year talking about trademark approvals for various product lines that she sells over there, and something I think even deals with a voting machine. So if you want to go after Hunter Biden and say, well, he doesn't know anything about energy, how is he sitting on the board of an energy company over in Ukraine? Well, what does Ivanka Trump know about voting machines? Isn't she in the real estate business? So look, I call it down the middle. I do my best to call balls and strikes, period. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. You're guilty. I want justice. Get rid of these people. Because if it's good enough to look into Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, then it's damn right and good to look into Donald Trump and his kids. Because they're still in business. And he's the president. Joe Biden isn't even in the government anymore. Now, of course, he's still very well connected, no doubt about it, which is probably the main reason why Hunter Biden is on those boards, has those deals, because of the political clout that he has, because there's a whole host of reasons why people get elected to boards. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are experts in that given industry. They bring something else to the table. Happens all the time. Look at the boards of many, many corporations. They have a diverse background of interest, and that's the reason. Some people has political clout. Some people's really good maybe with ethics. Some people's really good with accounting. Some people really know engineering and technical aspects of certain things. They want a broad perspective that's put on the board. So it doesn't mean, well, it's an energy company. You have to be an energy engineer or something like that. No, you don't. You don't. Would it help to have some more experience? Of course it would. But you don't have to have it. And that's what's being put out there. And again, I am not here to defend Joe Biden. I don't like Joe Biden, okay? He's an idiot, all right? I've told Joe to go back to Delaware to take a nap many times on this podcast, so I am not defending him. But if you're going to go after Joe Biden and his kids, then you got to go after Donald Trump and his as well, because he is the president, and these people are gallivanting with him all over the world. So just call it like it is, all right? We have our idiot friends at the Federal Reserve who are coming out. Jay Powell's coming out and say, well, the economy's good. All right, Jay, well, we've heard this before. We also hear this from Thunder Thumbs all the time, that this is the best economy ever. But guess what the Federal Reserve is going to do? They are going to do quantitative easing, which we talked about last week. But shh. Do not call it quantitative easing. That's exactly what it is. Why can't we call it what it is? Because we just don't do it. Don't do it. And we told you this weeks ago, if not months ago, that quantitative easing is coming back, but they are not going to call it quantitative easing, and that's exactly what's happening. They are going to print $60 billion per month, $60 billion per month to buy short-term U.S. Treasuries. So the Federal Reserve is once again coming back to bail out Uncle Sam and to monetize the debt. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Not good at all. They are also going to be extending the overnight repo market. Wow, who predicted that? We did, amongst others out there too. Give credit where credit's due. But we did here too at the Capital News. It's plain as day to see, folks. Plain as day to see. Last month, during their FOMC meeting and the subsequent news conference afterwards, Jay Powell comes up, oh, this is just a one-off in the repo market. It's quarter end. Corporations got to pay taxes. There's some U.S. Treasuries that are maturing. It was just a little bit of a liquidity shortage, but no problem. Nothing to see here, folks. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Everything's fine. And we said, you know what? That's a bunch of BS. But for the sake of argument, okay, Jay, we'll give you credit. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt. We'll see about this. And then what happens? Oh, got to continue. Another day, another night, another day, another night. They're continuing to engage in the overnight lending market because they cannot control short-term interest rates, which is exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So it's getting out of hand. They cannot control it. And then they said, well, you know what? This isn't a one-off. We're going to extend the repo market for, a few more weeks, October 10th, and then October 10th comes, and it's still not good enough. We're going to have to push this out to November 4th, and we're not even there yet, folks, and November 4th has already been axed. So now this is going into January of 2020, at a minimum, January of 2020. Can't make this stuff up. These people are criminals. You understand this is an overnight bailout on a nightly basis. Something ain't right, folks. There is a liquidity shortage in the market. $1.3, $1.4 trillion in excess reserves sitting in bank vaults to be loaned out on an overnight basis for this very purpose, and it ain't enough. Or the banks that have the excess reserves do not trust the other party. I mean, it's probably a combination of both. There's no doubt that there's a liquidity shortage. Why? Because there's too much debt, and everybody needs money, and they need more money, and they need more money. This is the problem. You know what would be the solution to this, don't you? Higher interest rates, because it would demand people start to pay off their debts, which is going to be painful because it's going to affect growth, it's going to affect GDP, it's going to slow everything down. But guess what? That's what's needed. Because if you continue with this monetization, this debt monetization, you continue with this quantitative easing, which you're not supposed to say, but I'm going to say it here every day because that's what it is. You continue with this nonsense. You're keeping zombie companies alive. They need to go bankrupt. They need to be restructured. If they come out of restructuring, more power to them. If they go away, good. Then you allow the next entrepreneur to saddle up and take the reins and take over and do the job. That's how it's supposed to work. You keep these companies alive for longer, all you're doing is making the inevitable crash that much more severe. In duration, in degree, you name it. It's just going to make everything worse. But that's what they're doing. You have a good economy, according to the Federal Reserve, the greatest economy ever, according to Donald Trump. Yet, for some reason, we need QE4. We need lower interest rates. We have 3.5% unemployment figure. And we have relatively stable prices, according to their own numbers. They're targeting about 2% inflation. Depending on which one you pick, because there's so many different metrics out there, you have it right around it. 1.8, 2%, somewhere around 2.4%. So what's the problem? The Federal Reserve has a dual mandate of full employment and stable prices. Well, check. And now you might have a trade deal. No, we're going to get to that. It's a bunch of BS, of course. But nevertheless, that's what's being announced. That's the headline. Those are the tweets that are coming from Thunder Thumbs on a near-minute basis. I mean, it's too hard to keep up. All I know, it's the greatest deal ever, which of course it isn't. The next deal will be the greatest one ever. And then that one won't be because the next one will be the greatest one ever. So buckle up. It's going to be bumpy. So how are they going to justify cutting interest rates once again? Because they're going to do it. How do they justify quantitative easing? They're already doing it. This makes no sense whatsoever. Because even when Donald Trump was announcing this interim trade deal, this phase 1 BS, he was telling the Federal Reserve, yeah, we have this, but you got to cut interest rates. Why am I mentioning the trade war in relation to the Federal Reserve? Well, because back in July, when the Federal Reserve cut interest rates for the first time since the financial crisis, what did Jay Powell say? He said, this is a mid-cycle adjustment. That was the verbiage. Okay, that was the BS verbiage that Jay Powell put out. This is a mid-cycle adjustment, trying to play cute and say this is akin to the late 1990s when the Federal Reserve and Alan Greenspan, they did these mid-cycle adjustments. And guess what happened in the 1990s, folks? You had a melt-up in the stock market, particularly in the NASDAQ. You had the dot-com bust. So you go up another 10, 15, 20%, whatever the hell it was, and then it crashes 80%. You want to sign up for that deal? You think you're smart enough and quick enough to time it? I'm not. You think you are? Good luck to you. You want to get up another 10, 15%? Woohoo! My 401k's up there, and then it comes crashing down 80%. You think you're quick enough? You think you're going to know when to get out of there? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly when it's going to happen. That's why I tell you to stay diversified and stay vigilant. But that's what's going to happen. That's what they think they could get out of it. The Federal Reserve. This is a mid-cycle adjustment, and one of the main reasons why we're cutting interest rates in July is because of the trade uncertainty. That was it. That was it. That was the rationale in that press conference from Jay Powell on behalf of the Federal Reserve. Now we're shooting from the hip. We don't know what we're doing. We've never done this before. We don't know how effective monetary policy is going to be in relations to a trade war, but we're going to do it anyway. Mid-cycle adjustment. Hint, hint, we're only going to do this once. Of course, that wasn't going to happen. That was a bunch of baloney. We called them out on it. And what happened last month? They cut interest rates once again. And of course, they stopped quantitative tightening also back at that July meeting. And now you got full-blown QE, not called QE, but that's exactly what it is. And you got the Federal Reserve, which is likely to cut interest rates once again at the end of this month in October. And they're most likely going to do it again in their December meeting. Why? Because that's what they're going to do. They are hitting their targets according to their own data, yet they want to continue to engage in emergency monetary policy measures. It's one thing to cut interest rates. It's another thing to monetize the debt. QE is an emergency monetary tool. And let me tell you something. $60 billion, it ain't big enough. If they want to pack a punch for this market and or the economy, they ain't even close enough. Check out our video on thecapitalnews.com or our YouTube channel, The Capital News. Are central bankers trapped? This was a timely presentation right before that July meeting, and we said, look at the data, look at the ECB, look at the Bank of Japan, look at the Federal Reserve, look at their balance sheet, look at what quantitative easing is. Diminishing marginal returns are kicking in. That means every dollar does not go as far as it did before. So if they want to amount to anything that's going to pack a punch, they are going to have to dwarf QE1, QE2, and QE3 combined, as far as I'm concerned, to get that same type of effect. And $60 billion a month ain't even coming close. I don't want them to go bigger than that, but I'm just telling you, that's just the math of it. They're not even going to come close. Not even close. So that's a true shame. Another point I want to talk about here briefly is the Syrian-Turkish conflict that is escalating, despite the many threats from Donald Trump saying we're going to put further economic sanctions on Turkey if they go any further. Although we don't know the specifics as to what any further means, because we don't know the specifics of that phone call between President Donald Trump and President Erdogan of Turkey that took place right before Donald Trump said, yep, I'm out of Syria, and Turkey is going to be able to pretty much do what they want. There was some confusion about that. Now, they're not allowed to do whatever they want. But they are. So remember, we're against endless wars here. But that doesn't mean you just pull out and just say everybody be damned. Because if you're going to form alliances with the Kurds, which we have, if you're going to arm them, if you're going to train them, if you're going to share intelligence with them, and they suffer many, many casualties, many deaths, I mean, you can't just leave them to slaughter because the Turks are going after them. And now you have the Kurds in Syria forming an alliance to fight off the Turks. Let me tell you something, folks. The Turks continue deeper and deeper into Syria. The further they go, the more damage they do. There is going to be a declaration of war. Syria is going to declare war on Turkey. I mean, if you have another nation's military in your country, it's just a matter of time before that other country, here Syria, is going to declare all-out war on Turkey. So now you're going to have another Middle Eastern war. And, are we going to get involved in this? I have no idea. Are we going to go back in there? Because this is almost bipartisan. This just tells you sort of the military-industrial complex of it, of Republicans and Democrats both saying this is nonsense. We can't do this. We have to go back over there. We have to put extremely harsh sanctions on Turkey. Yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, you have Donald Trump saying we're not supposed to be there, these endless wars, I campaigned on this. Meanwhile, he's sending thousands more troops into Saudi Arabia or other nearby countries to scare off or fend off any type of threat from the Iranians. So which is it, Trump? You want the endless wars, or you want to keep sending them over there? Or you just moving them? Well, they're in Syria, they're right next door. Go over there into Qatar, go over there to Saudi Arabia to sort of deter the Iranians. You can't have it both ways. You just can't have it both ways. So we're going to have to keep you focused on that because that's a major geopolitical event, and it's not good for anybody. You also have the threat and the major concern, particularly of France and Germany right now, who are strongly denouncing Turkey's move into Syria because they are concerned with the refugee crisis. They already dealt with one several years ago. You remember that? And they're still sort of partially dealing with it. They are gravely concerned right now that if this escalates between the Turks and the Syrians, that they are going to have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of refugees making their way through Europe at a time when they simply can't afford it, at a time when there are people protesting high fuel costs, okay? To have hundreds of thousands of foreigners in their country that don't speak their language, don't believe in their values, you're going to have a problem. So this thing is going to get out of hand extremely quick. That's all I'm telling you, one way or the other. This trade war, this phase one, hallelujah, with Donald Trump and the Chinese. How many times have we heard this? You know, it was only a few weeks ago, folks, that we were told by Donald Trump himself and his chief trade advisor, Peter Navarro, who needs to be fired, that we are not going to accept a partial deal. It's a complete deal or it's nothing. It has to be a great deal or nothing. It has to be a better deal for the United States than China or it's nothing. Well, no, this is a partial deal. And it's not signed. It's not delivered. Nothing. Nothing. This isn't even on paper. But what do we hear? This is the greatest deal ever from Donald Trump, that China has agreed to purchase $40 to $50 billion of agricultural products. This is exactly what we were told a few months ago following the, the G8 summit, G7 summit over there in, or G20, I think it was the G20, over there in Japan earlier in this summer, right? That was a trade truce. The Chinese promised to buy more agricultural products and they didn't deliver. I mean, this is just continuing. This is Groundhog's Day. If you people believe this guy, you're nuts. I mean, nothing has come through. He's been saying, this has been going on for almost 2 years, right? Trade wars are easy to win. We have farmers who are being bailed out. We have farmers who are declaring and filing bankruptcy at multi-year high rates. Okay, that ain't winning. All right, I don't want to go on a tangent with the steel industry too, with all that stuff, because we talk about that here too. Not winning. All right. So here you have Donald Trump who comes in. Trade wars are easy to win. China's been screwing us for 30 years, so I'm going to slap all these tariffs. I'm going to get engaged in a trade war. Trade wars are easy to win. Nobody wins trade wars, which is perfectly evident. It's what we've been witnessing over the past couple of years. Again, the trade wars are not causing the economic slowdown. The economic slowdown was already in progress. The trade war simply exacerbates the problem, creates more headline risk, creates more volatility because of it. All right? But it is not the fundamental underlying problem. We talk about that all the time. So, Donald Trump comes in, trade wars are easy to win, farmers filing and declaring bankruptcy, multi-year high record rates, okay? He breaks it, basically. He breaks it. He breaks the system. Farmers suffer naturally. This is highly predicted. This is what happens. And now he wants to claim that he fixed it with the greatest deal ever. We don't even know what China is committing to. This is all spin. This is all hype. This is all Donald Trump looking for some type of win in the midst of the chaos that is ensuing his administration, that is surrounding his administration. That's all this is. And China wants it too. China just wants some relief from this too. Because China just didn't want the tariffs to go up. We still have 25% tariffs on, ladies and gentlemen. All this did was halted the increase from 25% to 30%. That's all this did. This halted it for the time being. That's it. There was no mention of the tariffs that are set to go into place in December. Remember that? Those ones were also delayed. Not because of any type of goodwill, but because Donald Trump got nervous. Because he knows that it isn't the Chinese who are paying the tariffs. He knows it's Americans who are paying the tariffs. He said, well, we're going to hold off because we don't want, just in case, anybody to be affected during the holiday shopping season. Yeah, That's an admission, ladies and gentlemen, that Donald Trump has been lying to you for months that China is paying these tariffs. China is not paying these tariffs. You are paying these tariffs. I am paying these tariffs. That's how they work, okay? That's how they work. You want to believe this guy? Let me tell you something. You got a problem. I'm telling you, especially with this type of stuff. I mean, there might be some things the president gets right, but this, he is not even close. Not even close, all right? So he breaks it, and now he wants all the credit for pretending that he just fixed it, all right? That makes no sense whatsoever. And that's why the markets, despite the fact that they have rallied over the past couple of days, Thursday and Friday in particular, they did not make new all-time highs. They did not make new all-time highs. I don't trust either side of this trade deal. I don't trust the Chinese to make good on it, and I don't trust the United States to stick with it. I don't trust what Donald Trump tells me, because he's been telling us stuff for 2 years, and none of it has come true. None of it except we're increasing tariffs, and that happened. And that's it. He wants to halt them. They get halted. They go up. They halt. That's it. Those are the only things that have come true. That's it. End of story. If China does commit to buying $40 or $50 billion worth of agricultural products, it's going to take 2 years for that to transpire. So how are we going to know that they're keeping up? We're going to have to be strung along for another year, another 2 years. Unbelievable. And what would that take? If this is an agreement to buy $40 to $50 billion worth of agricultural products over the course of 2 years, okay, you do the math, that's somewhere between $20 to $25 billion per year. If you look at how many agricultural products were sold under Obama, that's the exact amount. So Donald Trump broke it. We're down to $7 billion. Now he claims that he's fixed it and made it even better, going back to where Obama had when Obama was in power. And I'm not here to defend Barack Obama. I don't like Barack Obama either. But this is just ridiculous. These are the facts. I mean, if you want to believe the spin, shame on you. But I'm just letting you know what it is. This is what the United States used to sell to China. Now they don't, because trade wars are easy to win. They're not, and nobody wins them. He broke it, and now he wants to pretend that he's fixed it. And there is no validation, there's no verification of this. We also don't know, we really don't know much of anything, folks. We really don't, other than this is the greatest deal ever. And this is phase one. We weren't going to have any phases. We weren't going to have any partial deals. That's what we were told a couple weeks ago. Now we have one. But it's partial. And it's just verbal. Nothing in writing. Nothing has been signed. Nothing has been delivered. So, I mean, you want to continue to believe this guy. I mean, shame on you. But the markets, nonetheless, on Friday, at their open, they gapped up a few hundred points. When you hear gap up or gap down, if you listen to the financial markets, if you don't understand what that means, it simply means that there's overnight trading in the futures markets. And if the market right out of the gate is up 100 points or 300 points like it was on Friday, basically, they gapped up 300 points from yesterday's close. Conversely, if it's down 300 or 100 or 10 points, whatever, you say it gapped down by that amount, okay? The markets were fueled by hope. That's all it was last week, okay? That there was some type of trade deal. It's all optimism, just justification to go buy. That's all it was. The markets on Friday were up. The major indexes, well over 1%, close to 2%. The Russell 2000, the small cap index, was well above 2%. But you had all of these rumors coming out that there's going to be some sort of interim trade deal, some sort of trade truce. Markets go up. And then Donald Trump announces the deal a little bit before market close, and the market sold off. So you had markets that were the Dow was almost at 2%. It closed down about 1.3%. So, I mean, you're talking basically a decline in the last half hour of trading of 0.7%. That's huge. So this in real time was buy the rumor, sell the fact. Buy the rumor, sell the fact. How much longer is this going to continue? The markets are supposed to have a great nose for BS. Yet for some reason, these algorithms, these computers, everything, it just keeps continuing to buy the headlines. It can't decipher. It cannot identify the difference between one headline versus the next. It just takes it literally. This is the greatest deal ever. Let's buy. It doesn't realize that Donald Trump's a BS artist. And every deal that he ever signs or pretends that he's going to sign is the greatest deal ever. The computers can't tell the difference. So let me just tell you, when this cracks and when the markets no longer believe this, look out below. Just look out below. So we're going to continue to be strung on. How many phases are there going to be? I have no idea. No idea. Donald Trump doesn't have any idea either, but he's going to continue to string this along. He is going to continue to play this game for full-blown market manipulation. He continues to say this is the greatest economy ever. He continues to tout, 3.5% unemployment. Yet he still wants the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates and do quantitative easing. That is vast market manipulation, period, end of story. End the Federal Reserve, abolish the federal income tax, investigate Joe Biden, investigate Donald Trump. Investigate them all. Drain the swamp, because it ain't being drained at all. We covered a lot of territory here. Those stories will continue throughout the remainder of this week. I really didn't even get to a lot of the other details. I didn't get to the NBA. So we're going to talk about these other things throughout the remainder of this week. All of this stuff being thrown at the markets real quickly here as I sign off. That gap up, that was what I wanted to talk about. So you had the market gap up and it sold off. So it basically closed flat for the day. It closed up 300 points, the Dow did. So despite the fact that the markets were told there's a Brexit deal, there's an interim trade truce, and more to come, more good things to come, and that the Federal Reserve is once again more likely going to cut interest rates and embark on monetizing the debt, the market closed where it opened on Friday. You get my point? You're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at this market, and it's still not making new highs. Now, you don't know what's going to happen this week. Maybe it will. Maybe we will have that melt-up scenario to go up another 10%, another 20%, only to come down 50, 60, 70, 80%. Believe me when I tell you. You can call me crazy. You can turn the channel off. But let me tell you something. I will be proven to be right, and I'm going to stick with it. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies and gentlemen. Hope to have you back for the remainder of this week because it is going to be quite the roller coaster ride. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. Please like, share, subscribe, get the word out, and leave your comments. We do love hearing from you. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Kouraitis. Godspeed.